Hey everybody, what's going on? Thanks for stopping by and checking out the card pile. Today we're going to do a quick little showcase of a couple of professional wrestling cards that I own. And when I say a couple of professional wrestling cards that I own, I do mean only two. And the first one I have is from 1982, 1983, BBM, and I can't pronounce the second name. And if you could, please let me know, and then we'll both know. But this is from a Japanese professional wrestling magazine, and it showcases then champion Bob Backlund. He was the WWF champion from the late 70s till about 1983. They wanted to phase him out and bring in a new baby face, which means good guy, which would end up being Hulk Hogan. So they had Bob Backlund, who won 2 titles in college from North Dakota State, uh, lose to the Iron Sheik, and the Iron Sheik beat Bob Backlund by using his infamous move, the camel clutch. And while Bob Backlund didn't tap out and didn't give up, Bob Backlund's manager threw in the towel, so they called the match, and basically the Iron Sheik won. The Iron Sheik was a champion for about a month, and then they brought in Hulk Hogan, which kicked off Hulkamania, and the rest is history. But Bob Backlund was a solid champion. He was kind of like Brock Lesnar before Brock Lesnar, and it's got the old school WWF belt there, which is pretty sweet, and the infamous towel in his hand because he always wore it around his neck and then handed it to his manager. And next thing you know, the manager throws in the towel, and that's how he lost the title. And the back looks like some scorecard. There's a little bit of Japanese writing on it with some English numbers. And so I don't really know about the back. Don't know much about these cards. I just know that is a great looking shot of the great Bob Backlund. And it's graded SCG 4.5. So that's a pretty wild, odd card to have, and I kind of like it. It's got everything. It's got the belt. It's got him. It's a pretty solid card. So that's the first one I have. And the second card I have is from 1982 Wrestling All-Stars, and it's Dick the Bruiser. He's from my city. Actually, he's from a little town south of my city, but he ended up going to high school in my city, the exact high school that I went to. And then after high school, he ended up playing football over at Purdue University, which is across the river from my town. And then he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And while playing for the Packers, he ended up sustaining an injury, and a friend of his is like, hey, why don't you try professional wrestling? So Dick the Bruiser tried professional wrestling, and he was really good at it. Ended up being legendary. He was known as the world's most dangerous wrestler. And in the 60s, he was in a match against the Japanese opponent, Antonio Inoki, in New York at Madison Square Garden, and a riot broke out. Dick the Bruiser ended up roughing up like 5-6 cops. It was a whole big, violent, crazy mess. And the New York State Athletic Commission pretty much banned Dick the Bruiser from wrestling professionally anywhere in New York State. So he had that going for him. But he never really made it to the WWF much because he wasn't allowed to wrestle in New York. So he was pretty much based in Indianapolis and Detroit in the Midwest. He ended up owning a wrestling organization, the World Wrestling Association, based out of Indianapolis for several years. And I think he folded that up around in the 90s somehow. But he used to tag team with the Crusher, who was from Milwaukee. He's the wrestler that made Milwaukee famous. But Dick the Bruiser, you go and talk about the toughest wrestlers in professional wrestling ever, and he's got to be right up there. I mean, his name is Dick the Bruiser. And then here's the back. It even talks about the riot and about a couple of his former tag team partners, like I mentioned. There's Wilbur Snyder, the Crusher, and he even tag teamed with his son-in-law, who was Spike Huber at the time. Now, in my city, there was a place called the National Guard Armory, where the wrestlers would come all the time and put on shows when I was a kid. And Dick the Bruiser was always there, always beating people up. And it just looked so real when you're a kid, and he just made it seem so real because of how he was. But out of the matches, and when he met the crowd and everything, He was a super nice guy. Super nice guy. And he's pretty much a local legend here in the state of Indiana and maybe even in the Midwest. So those are the two cards I have of professional wrestling. I like them, and I hope you enjoyed this little video, and let me know what you think, and tell me who your favorite professional wrestler is. All right, thank you very much.